Okay, the obvious opening skit thing for this video would probably be for me to do something like hang the Romanian flag in the background and then just sit here in silence with, I don't know, hashtag moment of silence on screen or something, because today Romania was kicked out of Eurovision, but I'm gonna talk about that in tomorrow's video, so thanks for understanding with that. Hello everyone, I am Tessellating Hexagons, looking pale as ever because I'm front-lit and wearing a brightly coloured shirt in not very good lighting conditions, so I'm going to look very pale even though I'm not very pale in real life. Anyway, today is the 22nd day of April and of VEDA, because that's how VEDA works, and how April works because chronology. But yeah, it's Friday again, it's time for yet another Fair Trial Friday, and I did have a game picked out for this Fair Trial Friday to talk about, to discuss at length, because so far my fair trials have been either a deliberate joke or mixed to positive responses, and I was going to do one that wasn't quite as positive, but it would have been really controversial to do it, and so I might save that for next week, just to end VEDA on this big controversial bang. But I'm then left with a question of, well, if I'm going to save that to be my grand finale, then what do I do this week? And I received a Facebook message from EuropeScalo8 saying, oh, I had this dream that you're doing a Fair Trial Friday of this game that I'm about to talk about. And I don't remember the rest of what she said in that message, but the point is, I looked at that message and thought, you're onto something here. I could actually, yes, I am going to do this. And so that's how I came to the decision to do a Fair Trial Friday of Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival for the Wii U. I don't know how to start with this one. Well, I suppose I should start with how people already feel about it, because, I was rather excited when they first announced this, because, oh my god, it's Mario Party but with Animal Crossing characters. And some people, I think, shared my sentiment, and then it was released, and then it got a horribly lukewarm reception from people. I saw people slamming it as being too slow-paced, and being really boring, and not the game they thought it was. And I was hesitant to give it a try. But then I saw it on sale for stupid cheap, and I thought, well, I mean, it looked good, and it's really cheap, so why not invest in it? And then I did, and then I played it, and, well, here we are now for this review. So, as I do whenever I do a review, I'll begin with what this game does right. For a board game style game, it is really well structured. It's got plenty of atmosphere, it's got all the usual Animal Crossing charm, because each game, as it were, is hosted by one of the villager animals from the game, an animal that could feasibly live in your town in New Leaf, or the Wii version, or any of the other games, depending on if that animal was in the game at that stage. And it genuinely feels like that character is hosting, so clearly it's written by the same people, so, I mean, it's got the Animal Crossing logo on it, so I don't know what I was expecting, but it does genuinely feel like an Animal Crossing game without the obligation. It feels like Animal Crossing applies to a different genre, which is nice and refreshing and fun. Not to mention, you can play as animals that you can't normally, because in regular Animal Crossing games you can only play as human characters, but in this you can play as the animals, and that's nice, even though I do find it ironic though that the only playable characters here are I'm not sure how to describe them, the NPCs who are consistent to everyone's sound, the non-villager animals, so the likes of Tom Nook and Reese, Cyrus, KK Slider, etc., etc. So there's a bit of a beautiful irony there, but because these characters are common across everyone's Animal Crossing experiences, to whatever extent, KK Slider being in every game, Reese and Cyrus being more recent additions to the roster, but nevertheless, to whatever extent, Animal Crossing players can find a character that they have some emotional connection with, and they are guaranteed to have an emotional connection with them because they're present in everyone's town when they start the game, or at some point when they're playing through the game, whereas the regular animal residents, you could have no more than 10 in your town at once, or I think 15 in the GameCube version, so it's even though there are only 4 personality types for each gender, or 3 prior to New Leaf, you still build up a personal connection with a specific animal with a certain personality type, so even if you have a different animal with the same personality type, you might have a completely different experience with them. Case in point, Blanche the Ostrich and Greta the Mouse both lived in my town in New Leaf at some point, but not at the same time, and they're both the snooty female type. And Blanche was really pleasant to be around. Greta, I really did not like her. but they have exactly the same personality. So you see, these non-villager animals, because they're a constant throughout everyone's games, and they also have more unique personalities as well, because obviously they're non-villager animals, so because they're irreplaceable within the game, you build up more of a connection with them that everyone can relate to, rather than just a really niche connection to an animal that someone else might not even recognize. So I suppose it's good that they've chosen them to be the player characters. On the subject of animal resident thingies, the game itself, the board on which the game is played, like, there is only one board if you're going to put it in Mario Party terms, but that board grows and changes because the board itself is an Animal Crossing town. I don't think it's randomly generated. I think it's the same board no matter which game, save file, whatever you're playing on. So you could load the same game on 3 different Wii U's and it would be the same town layout. But as you play through the game, you get these happy tickets, I think they're called, which I know is a painfully stereotypically Nintendo name, but you can exchange those for features to put into your town, which then change the layout of the board and change the events that can happen on the board, and you can customize the board in the same way that you can customize your town in Animal Crossing. And similarly, you can have up to 10 animal residents. If you have their Amiibo cards, you can scan them into the game, and then they'll live in that town like they would in actual Animal Crossing. So, in that regard, it's a really nice touch, because you've got all the town without any of the obligation, albeit with completely different gameplay, but nevertheless. Now, the flow of the game itself, it is slow-paced, but my defense for that is, if you're going into this expecting a reskin of Mario Party, that's not what it is, but that's never what it was designed to be. It's a digital board game, a digital party game of sorts, but for the Animal Crossing demographic, not for the party game demographic. So if you're expecting Wii Party U, Mario Party whatever, but the Animal Crossing edition, that's not what it is, and that's not what it was designed to be. And so I think the pace of the game is justified, because the way it works is you pick a month of the year and play through it. Each participating player rolls a single 6-sided die, and then they move however many spaces. And once every player has moved once, then the time advances by 1 day, because even though it's the same board, you can play in different months of the year. And that's what differentiates each gameplay session. And so once everyone has rolled once, time advances by 1 day. And different events happen on different days of the week. You can have random non-player animals coming into town like Crazy Red, who can sell you cards, which are like this game's version of candy from Mario Party 8 or capsules from Mario Parties 5 and 6. The items, basically. And there's also Katie the Kitten, who just gives you a card for free if you can beat her at her little mini-game. Dr. Shrunk, who, okay, a lot of them give you cards, but also there's Katrina the Fortune Teller, who can do tarot reading. And it's really nice that this game has its own actual properly designed tarot card system. Like, it's based on an actual arcana of tarot cards, but with Animal Crossing characters. It's really well designed, and they can have bonus effects like, oh, whenever someone rolls a 4, then you get money, or you lose happiness, or something like that. And then every Sunday, Joan the turnip seller comes into town, you can buy turnips and then sell them on any day of the week that isn't Sunday, but you have to sell them within a week, and then it's referred to in-game as the stalk market, but that is one beef I have with Animal Crossing. It hasn't been translated into English, and that pun doesn't work in English. And when I say English, I mean English. Fight me. So the objective of the game is to get around the board, get as many so-called happy points as possible, and perhaps pick up money whilst doing so, because every 1,000 bells that you have, which bells being the in-game currency just like it is in all Animal Crossing games, every 1,000 bells equals +1 bonus happy points at the end of the game. And so, to put it in proper Mario Party terms, not the Mario Party 9-10 bullshit that we've had to put up with lately, but in classic Mario Party terms, happy points are like stars, and then money is like coins, except at the end, coins are automatically converted into however many stars you could afford, except in this instance it's 1,000 bells equals 1 happy point. And also, the incentive to actually move around the board and go to different areas is there are stamp stations in each of the 4 corners, and when you get your first stamp you get a bonus of 5 happy points, when you get the second one you get a bonus of 10, the third one gives you a bonus of 15, and when you complete the 4-part stamp picture you get a bonus of 30 happy points. So there is an incentive to go around the board. As I've discovered playing it myself, not getting all 4 stamps isn't the be-all and end-all, but it does help. So you're not permanently screwed out of it if you don't go after the stamps, but it does help a lot, and the assumption is that you're going to. And of course, every now and then, on certain days of the year, there will be events that affect the entire board, in accordance with dates that stuff would happen in actual Animal Crossing, stuff like Festival, or Easter, or Toy Day, which is their analogue for Christmas, or the fishing tournaments, or the bug-catching competitions, known colloquially as the bug-offs, which it adds a load of event spaces to the board, and the idea is no matter what, most, if not all, players are going to get some sort of happy point bonus by the end of it. So in that regard, there's plenty of variety of what happens, although that said, it did take me a while to notice why this happened, but on seemingly random days of the month, there's what they call twice dice day, where everyone gets to roll 2 dice instead of just 1, so you can move a maximum of 12 spaces instead of 6. And it took me a really long time. I'm ashamed to say it took me ages to work out why that happens. It happens on the 11th and the 22nd turn, the 11th and 22nd of each month, because double number, 11 is 1-1, 22 is 2-2, so twice dice. But there's also a thing that's kind of the opposite of that, called opposite day. I haven't worked out what triggers that, but it's annoying as fuck. About 3 weeks into the game, so somewhere around the 20th turn, there'll be what they call opposite day, where you roll a die as normal, but then you move backwards that number of spaces instead of forwards. It does have really good backwards music while that happens, but then around the board, there are positive spaces and negative spaces, as they're called. There are spaces that will give you plus money, plus happiness, or plus both. And then there's the negative equivalent, which will take away happy points, take away money, or both. On opposite day, if you land on a negative space, a good thing happens, and so positive spaces look like positive spaces, but act like negative spaces, and vice versa. Which is confusing as fuck. Plus, it affects how the turnip mechanic works in the game as well, because normally, on days other than a Sunday, you can look at a space and see how much you could sell turnips for if you landed on that space. On opposite day, you can't see that until you land on that space, so if that was going to be a determining factor in which way you'd go at a junction, for example, then that you can't tell. And so you could end up sustaining a horrible loss. Again, I personally, my playstyle doesn't involve putting too much stock into buying turnips. Like, if it's cheap, then I'll invest in it because it's an easy way to make money, but I don't gamble big time stylely with it. So in short, there are a lot of interesting and varied mechanics to how the game works. And honestly, as I said, it's not that bad. You just have to go into it with the mindset that it's an Animal Crossing party game, not an Animal Crossing Mario party game. Having said that, having sung its praises and having considered it fairly, what does it do not quite as well? Well, I do reiterate, it does go at a slow pace, and if you're not prepared for that, then you might not have the best time of it. Although, that said, at the start of the game, you can set it to have an in-game timer that counts down, so you don't end up playing for too long. You can set it for 20 minutes or half an hour, or something like that. Just so that the game tells you, hey, you've been playing for 30 minutes, just so that you're aware of the time. Because normally the game ends once you get to the end of the month, but you can set it to end sooner than that if you put in a timer to make sure you don't play for too long. But that said, when the timer expires, the game then asks you, okay, it's been half an hour, do you want to continue playing or not? So that's a nice feature that they put in, but that does highlight it is slow paced, so that might not be what you're looking for. Similarly, if you're expecting minigames in the same vein as Mario Party, no, not in the main game. There are side minigames which you can play using Amiibo cards, but some are good, some are not as good. It's a bit of a mixed bag, really, but they don't appear in the main game at all, so they're side modes. Just to reiterate, it's not a Mario Party game. That's all I can say on that front, really. Having said that, though, apart from the bullshit opposite day mechanic, which I cannot get behind, there are a couple of actual genuine problems that I have with the game. First of all, something that I hated on principle about this one when it was first announced is you need an Amiibo to play. Now, I have 5, he says, holding up 3, but here are the other 2. That's because I got really lucky with getting the Amiibo, because when I first got the game, it came bundled with the Isabelle and Digby Amiibo. And for some reason, the game was priced at £35 with those 2 and 3 Amiibo cards all bundled with it. Which is funny, because in the shop where I bought the bundle, the game alone was selling for £50+, and one Amiibo is usually between £11 and £15. So that's £30 here, 50 here, so that's already £80, plus it costs between £3 and £5 to buy a pack of 3 Amiibo cards. So I bought an £85+ bundle for £35. Genius. And then I also got the Reese, Cyrus, and KK Amiibo as some sort of, not a bundle, but there was a 3-pack of them. The shop that was selling them had no idea how to price it, so they were selling them for insanely cheap because they didn't know how much they were actually worth. But I recognise that people aren't likely to be as lucky as that all the time. And so my frustration initially was, so you need to buy the game for 30, 40, maybe even £50, and then pay an additional £15 for each player, including player 1. Now, mercifully, that's not actually the case. You do need a minimum of 1 amiibo, but then every other player can just be a human villager, which doesn't require an amiibo, but it doesn't save your progress. Like, with the amiibo themselves, you can actually scan the results of the game into the amiibo and save up happy points that you've accumulated over the course of however many games, and then that levels up the amiibo, so you can have different costumes in-game, different emotion, reaction, icon, thingy things. It's hard to describe if you've not seen it in context, but the amiibo can level up depending on how well you do at each game. So it's nice functionality, but I don't like the notion of having to pay an additional £15 for each player. One kind of criticism that I have as well, I mean, it works in context, and so I'm not too salty about it, but it does feel like the game is one long, drawn-out game of chance, because it's just a matter of rolling dice, and then if you hit a junction, okay, pick whichever direction suits you best, but ultimately it's just, you might land on a good space, you might land on a shit space. Who was the luckiest after about 30 days? That's essentially what it boils down to. It's significantly more luck than judgment. There is judgment in there, and it is a fun gameplay experience, but it is mostly luck, especially since there are some properly bullshit board events in there. For example, you can land on a happy space, where when you land on a space, you get a diary entry from that character detailing, I did this today, and it resulted in me gaining or losing happiness or money. Sometimes you'll get a happy space that's like, I invited my friends over, i.e. I invited the other players over for dinner, and it was so good that they insisted on paying for it, so that player gets plus happiness, and then everyone else loses money. But that's not the biggest kick in the teeth. There is, somewhere, I don't remember whether it's plus money and happiness, or if it's just plus money, but there's a space where if you land on it, the game declares, I grew a money tree. And you get 90,000 bells on the spot. Bearing in mind, by the end of the game, normally you'll have around 40,000 bells left over and around 100 happiness. 90,000 bells at the end of the game. Whether you spend that on turnips or not, that's an instant win right there. And so it's completely RNG, but you could, and as we have had, you can land on a space that just breaks the game, and there's no coming back for that for the other players unless you mismanage your money. And if you get that space and then deliberately avoid spending money, then that's it. You've just guaranteed one. You've essentially become the Sweden of the game. It's already decided that you've won before anything competitive has even happened. Fight me. So it is one long drawn-out game of cards with RNGsus, or something to that effect. It is still a fun experience, and it is still nice and cute, and I do still enjoy it, to such an extent that I do intend to do a couple of videos on it on this channel at some point. But just be aware that there is some bullshit luck in there, and it isn't the same kind of pace as Mario Party. It's not as much. It's more luck than judgment, and it's more luck than Mario Party, even though Mario Party 5 is full of luck-based minigames anyway. It might not be what you're expecting, but it's not that bad. So let's just bring in the graph of sentimentality, or whatever I'm going to end up calling this if I even give it a name. Now, the public at the moment, mixed reception, they feel about here. And I do feel that they've been overly critical of it, because when I first saw people reacting to the game on Twitter and whatever, they were absolutely bashing it, like, oh no, this is awful, why did I pay money for it? And that seemed a little bit harsh, because I've played it myself. Yes, there are some bullshit luck elements, but my judgment is more up there, because it's not a bad game. It might not be exactly what you're expecting from the outset, but it's actually really enjoyable. Yes, there's some bullshit moments, but it's not actually that bad. And so, if you're willing to be patient with the bullshit elements and the slow pace of the game, basically, if you're an Animal Crossing player, then yes, by all means, I recommend this, because it's actually a lot of fun. If you're a Mario Party, Wii Party kind of player, and that's all you're in it for, then it might not be your sort of thing, but I do still recommend giving it a chance. No pun intended given how chance-heavy the game is, but it is worth a look. It is worth giving it a try, and it's certainly not as bad as the critics make it seem. But if you want to judge for yourself, as I said, at some point over the summer, I will be doing a multi-part series Probably featuring myself, Europe Scalawait, and both my parents, but I haven't worked it out just yet. Something like that will be in the pipeline, and you can have a look at that and judge for yourself, see if the game is your sort of thing. But for now, I will say I have been, and will continue to be, Tessellating Hexagons, and I will see you in whichever video of mine that you happen to choose to watch next, you lovely, lovely people. See you then.